welcome to another edition of Math with Mr. Douglas. What are we going to find today? Kill me sometimes. Today we are focusing on slope-intercept form. So graphing straight lines, y equals mx plus b. Alright, let's get to it. Today we're talking about slope-intercept form. So what does slope-intercept form look like? So we're talking about slope-intercept form, and that literally tells you the parts that you use to graph. So slope-intercept form uses, get this, the slope and the intercept. So what's that going to look like? As a formula, we're talking about this form then. Y equals mx plus b. And that gives you two different parts that we use to graph. M is going to be the slope, and b is the intercept. Now, which intercept is it? It's the y-intercept. And if you go and think about what the word intercept means, it means to kind of like break apart or cross. So that's where it crosses the y-axis. So when we're talking about that, what it looks like is if you have, you know, a graph, and here's your typical kind of graph. Let's go like this. So you have a slope that you can go and figure out, and you guys should be good with figuring out slope now. So you figure out the rise and the run. So how much does it rise? Like say it rose 2, and say it ran this way like -3. And then where did it cross the y-axis? So where did it go and cross? Well, it crossed right there. And let's just say that was 1. Okay, so you have your slope and you have your y-intercept. So if you had to say, what's the equation of this? It'd be like y equals the rise over the run. So y is equal to -2/3 x. And what's the y-intercept? It's +1. So boom. So there you go. That's what we're talking about today, slope-intercept form. What you're going to be asked is to go and graph lines. So, and this is super fast, like how you go and do it. So if the equation was y equals 1/4 x, say -2, and they say go graph it, all right, well that's going to be super easy now. Because the first step, so like step 1, is plot the y-intercept. So plot the y-intercept. So which is really b, right, in the equation. So go and plot this. Only common kid mistake is forgetting about its -2. So it's -2. So on the y-axis, where is -2? Well, it's right about here. And then step 2, so step 2 is do slope from b. Do slope from b. So I'm going to do the slope from b. And it says it rise. So it rises 1 and it runs 4. So from B, so from this point, not the origin, that's the common kid mistake. You do it from B. So you rise 1 and you run over like 4. So something like that. And there you go. And that's what you're... Actually, you know what? There's a student, I'm not going to name names, that said, your straight lines are horrible, Mr. Douglas. Why don't you just use a ruler on your tablet? You guys know I'm using like a Wacom tablet. So she's like, why don't you do that? And I'm like, you can do that on a tablet? And she's like, yeah, of course you can. So I'm going to try using a ruler right now. Whoa. Well, that was pretty cool, but I missed my lines. See, the problem with using this, let's try this line. Oops, I don't want to do that. Is that going to be better? Oh, I missed it again. This is kind of getting fun now. So I wonder if I can just take this. No, I take the whole thing. Oh, interesting. So I got to work on how to use the ruler. And get rid of that now. There should be an easy way of how to use rulers and stuff, right? Oh my gosh, what's that? Is that like a straight line I can do stuff with? Sorry, I'm having way too much fun right now. That is a nice line, but I want to make it colored. I wonder how I do that. No, that went away. All right, I'm going to go and play around with that though, because that was pretty cool. And you're like, can we please move on, Mr. Douglas? Okay, so you figured out how to use the slope-intercept form to go and quickly graph. Don't need a table, don't need anything like that. So if that's so easy, then what's the big deal? Well, the big deal is when you get questions like this, and it says, write an equation, and they'll typically tell you what form we want in. So write an equation in slope-intercept form and graph it. When a line passes through, let's think of some really cool ones. So it passes through, let's say, I don't know, -2, 3, and 5, 4. Okay. So what do you gotta do here? I need to graph a line. I could plot these points and graph the line. And I could try and figure out what the y-intercept was, and I could try to figure out what the slope is. If the numbers work out and they're all pretty, that'll work. But what if the numbers aren't pretty? What's a tried and true algebraic way to go and do it? I'm glad you asked. Step 1 is find m using the formula you already know. So find m doing y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1, right? That's step 1. Go and do that. Okay. You guys can go and do that. I know that. Remember, that's x1, this is y1, this is going to be x2 and y2, and you're going to go and do a bunch of math. So you'd go and do 4 minus 3, so you do 4 minus 3 over 5 minus 2. Ooh, double negatives become positive. So 4 minus 3 is 1. This is going to be positive 7. I got m. Step 1 is complete. Woo! Step 1. Awesome. Which, of course, brings us to step 2. And if you're thinking, I have my m, that's great. Well, what else do I need to graph? You need b. How would you go and find b? Well, I'm glad that you asked that. How would you go and do that? So step 2 is find b. And you have to use the m you just found and pick one point for x and y. Okay, so what kind of things do you know now? You already knew that your m was going to be 1/7, but now you have to go and pick a point. So remember, your points were -2, 3, and 5, 4. So your points were -2, 3, oops, and 5, 4. Those were your points. You only need to pick one of them. It doesn't matter which one you want to pick. If I'm a kid, I'm probably going to pick 5, 4 because they're positive. So I'm going to pick that one, so I'm going to erase this one. And these are going to be my x and my y. So that's my x, and this is my y. Great. So you've used the m, and you pick a point. Great. So what are you doing with all that? You're going to go and replace it into y equals mx plus b. So that is slope-intercept form. So y equals mx plus b. I'm going to go and just use brackets to make this kind of hopefully obvious. And we don't have a b. We're trying to figure out what b is. So now we're going to go and replace. We have our m, which is 1/7. Our x is 5. And our y is 4. Now we're going to go and solve for b. So we're going to have to go and do, 1/7 times 5, which is just, 5/7. And then I'm going to go and subtract 5/7 from both sides. So I'm going to try and squeeze this in, subtract 5/7, and I'm subtracting 5/7. So eventually, I'm going to get b is equal to whatever 4 minus 5/7 is. So I'm going to use my calculator because I haven't had coffee yet today. So 4 minus 5/7 is going to be positive 23/7. Boom, like that. Okay, so now I can go and write my equation. I got b, and I have m. So now my actual equation is going to be y equals 1/7 x plus 23/7. Awesome. And if you're going to go back and graph stuff, right, you have to go and graph that. This is where kids kind of struggle. So, use that cool button on your calculator you probably have. So that's about 3.2. Remember, when you're graphing, like 1, 2, 3, 4, so like where is, there we go. Where is 3.2 about? It's about here. And then it's going to rise 1. Okay, so it rises 1, and it's going to run 7. So it's going to be something like this. And that's what I'm wanting. And there's that. Oh, that line was pretty good. That's kind of what we're wanting there. So that's how to go and figure out a slope-intercept form equation and graph it given 2 points. And it's a little bit long and complex. But with a little bit of practice, you get pretty quick at it. And it's not too bad. Good job, everybody. In the challenge section today, we are going to be looking at graphing absolute value. Yes, those are those things inside the bars. So absolute value, what does it look like to graph? And what are some tips that we can have when tackling those kinds of questions? Let's get to it. The return of absolute value. That's what we're going to be looking at. So we're looking at things inside the bars. So we're taking a look at this, and basically let's move that over there. So what does it look like to graph absolute value? Well, absolute value, let's just kind of break it down, is going to look like a V. Okay, so y equals x so y equals the absolute value of x. Looks like that. A couple of things of y. It's important to know why. So, oops. There we go. If if I said, what's the absolute value of a variable, you're going to get a positive or a negative because we don't know what it is. So you can get 2 different answers, one positive and one negative. It's kind of like when you took the square root of things. The square root of 4 is plus or minus 2. So you're getting a positive and a negative. So when you're solving absolute value stuff, you're going to get a positive version and a negative version. So that's kind of why you get that. So you get a positive and a negative, you get a positive and a negative, and you get a positive and a negative. And that makes a V. What we need to figure out is what's the vertex and how big does the V look? Is the V normal? Is it wide? Does it go upside down? Is it narrow? So that's what we're going to learn right now. So I'll show you a couple of classic absolute value equations and what they look like. And then I'll tell you how we figure it out. Ooh, the anticipation. So y equals the absolute value of x is just a V that hits the origin. Easy. What happens if I make it negative absolute value of x? And actually, you know what? Let's make this color-coded. So what happens if I make it y equals the negative absolute value of x? Then it's going to go down, but still be a regular V. Okay. What happens if I add maybe a number in front of there? Like, let's say a 5 and the absolute value of x, like that. So we know it's going to open up, but this is going to be a skinnier one, like that. So as this number goes up, the skinniness increases. It gets more narrow. Whereas if you have a very wide, like a small number, like a half is pretty small, it's going to be a very wide graph, like that. Okay. And obviously, if we made these negative, they would do the exact same thing, but go down. Okay. So what happens though when we start adding other numbers into it? So what happens when we start having other numbers? Well, if you have things that have a number on the outside, like plus 2. So y equals plus the absolute value of x plus 2. So what does that plus 2 do? The plus 2 tells you, so this tells you where on the y, maybe I should put it over here. So this, there we go, that tells you about the y-intercept for the vertex. So this would look something like this. It would still open up, regular old v, but now it starts there. Whereas if I said like y equals the absolute of x minus, I don't know, 5, it would start down here and still open up. Okay? And what if we said a number was inside here? So this is always interesting. So plus 2, just like that. So everything, this is the y-intercept. So for the vertex, we're talking about the y-coordinate for the vertex. This is going to be about the x-coordinate of the vertex. You're like, oh, okay, so it's positive 2. So it's going to be over here, right? Wrong. It actually is over here at negative 2. What? It's at negative 2. And if we put everything together, what if you had something that said, say, x minus 3 and plus 5? So this would be at the positive 3 for the x and the positive 5 for the y. So 3, 5. So your vertex would be probably something around here. And of course, it would be opening up like a regular. So what can we say? Have you figured out what the rules are? So if you had to go and figure out a rule, what could you go and actually say about this kind of stuff? And this is what kind of mathematicians go and figure out, right? What does it look like? And can we go and make up rules? So I'll give you a base form. So y equals a times the absolute value of, we'll say, x minus h plus k. And what we want to know is how to figure out the vertex. And the vertex is always going to be h comma k. And that means that's going to be your x and your y. Notice that and this is the only part that confuses kids, is that this part here is a negative h, which means you take the opposite sign to put it in there. The opposite sign. So don't think of positives or negatives, think of the opposite. So if this says plus 2, you put minus 2 here. If this says minus 7, you put positive 7 here. But k remains the same. The a, though, it just tells you the shape of the v. So is it wide? Is it narrow? And the shape and the direction of opening. So how it opens. If it's positive, it opens up. And if it's negative, it opens down. So now I should be able to go and give you equations. And you should be able to look at them and graph them. That's all I'm kind of wanting. So if I gave you something like 1/4 times the absolute value of x minus 5 plus 2, so x minus 5 plus 2, then that is going to start to say that my vertex is going to be 5, 2, and it's going to open up upwards and be very wide. So it would be like this. And I find 5, 2, so it'd be around there. It's going to open up and it's going to be pretty wide. Probably like that. That's what we're expecting students to be able to do. Now you could go and choose, create a table and put a bunch of values in for x and solve and figure that out eventually. You could do that. Or you can just learn generally, what does the shape look like? A great thing to go and try, if you want to go and just try it out and see if you're okay at it, is go to a website called desmos.com. enter in your basic your formula, and just play around with the numbers and see what happens to the shape of the graph. It's pretty cool, and I highly recommend it. All right, excellent job, everybody. Thanks, everybody, for sticking around and watching another edition of Math with Mr. Douglas. Hopefully you learned something about slope-intercept form and graphing absolute value. Till next time, have a great day.